I said lie down. He shouted at me, sending me a hot slap, which landed me on the bed. I must have gone blind or deaf that instant, because the only thing I could hear was some ringing in my ears. By the time I realized what was happening, I felt a needle jammed into my arm and I passed out. By the time I came to, the back of my skull throbbed like a horse heart. I tried to check my arm and then I realized I couldn't move. Something was restraining my arms and feet. I could barely raise my head too. Everywhere was hazy and spinning. It was like I was paralyzed, but not completely. Luckily, I was able to turn my head to the entrance, where Henry was bound. One of the men was talking with him, still pointing the gun at him. He was the one out of the two whose eyes were left uncovered. I struggled to hear what he was saying and why they had to be hush about it. I could hear a word, but my brain refused to register, so I gave up. "Hey, she's awake," I heard the other announced, and then both Henry and the man stared at me. Henry looked at me with so much pity and terror. He struggled against the ropes and plasters, but it was useless. I shut my eyes and opened them as the first man came closer. He was big and his eyes were filled with pure hatred. I felt him climb onto the bed beside me. A tremor of panic vibrated in my core. I couldn't do anything, not to even lift a finger. Then I realized, whatever content they had put in my arm was having its full effect on me. No, no. This must not happen. God, please help me. Then he slowly lifted my wedding gown and patted my legs while he knelt in between, unbuckling his belt. Everywhere was still spinning, but I knew what was about to happen. I could feel the sweat, the throbbing of my own eyes, the ringing of my own silent screams. Hesitantly, my eyes went to Henry, who apparently was no more struggling, but whose eyes were now shut as hot tears flooded his cheeks. I felt him inside of me, and I shut my eyes as the paralyzing hurt spread inside me through my entire body. Sharp pain tore into somewhere deep down in my belly, and colorful spot flashed in my brain. The pain took me far away, but deep inside myself to some primitive place where I could handle that kind of pain that preceded death. Memories of my younger days flashed through my memory as I recalled how I had wanted my wedding night to be special. I had wanted my husband to disvirgin me, and now, that had been forcefully taken away from me. "Hey T." I turned around as I heard someone called my name. It was Rose. I signaled to her to hurry up as I took my seat beside my other coworkers. It was already some minutes past 4, and like we always did, we would meet at the cafeteria and just about ridiculous things for about an hour before we would all go home in our different cars. I worked for a telecommunication company at Victoria Island, and there was no much time to chit-chat for ladies, so we always did that after closing period. The cafeteria was noisy as always, while others were busy getting their bags from the lockers. Some like us were busy catching up with our friends. "Hey, look at you. I could barely recognize you this morning," Rose said, embracing me after we both took our seats. "Your wedding was beautiful, God. I am so happy I didn't miss it," Laura declared as she stuffed her mouth full with donut. I smiled. "I would have killed you had it been you missed it," I replied jokingly. "So how is Henry?" asked Cynthia. "He is fine," I replied, switching on my phone. I noticed the both exchanged glances. "What was that about?" Rose scoffed. "Girl, do we need to spell it out for you? You know how we always do this thing, at least, you started it. We don't understand why you have been avoiding it. You always seem somehow whenever it comes to this." Laura continued for her. "Comes to what?" I snapped. "The details, babe. Your first night, we want to know everything. It's been more than 2 weeks, and it's like you don't want to talk about it. You remember how you kept telling us you wanted your first night to be special? Now that you are no longer a nun, please tell us everything," Laura begged excitedly. "Did you scream? Did it hurt? How was Henry? Is he good, you know, stuffs like that." Rose completed for her. I was quiet for a while, and I know my eyes must have probably frozen over. My inside was damp all of a sudden, and I had to bit my lips to stop me from crying. I looked at their faces lit with excitements. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't. I was the one who started this. When Rosa got married, I made sure she told us everything right from their leaving the reception, the same thing with Cynthia, and it became a tradition. I was the only virgin amongst them before I got married. I told them I needed their experiences for my wedding night. Was it that bad? Cynthia asked with a little show of concern. I started with a shaky voice. It was okay, nothing special, I replied weakly as I tried effortlessly to push the bad memory back inside. Just okay? Laura demanded, a little bit angry. We need all the juices, Tola. You remember you made us promise to always do this. Sharp pain lanced through my head at her sudden demand. Look. It is my life, okay? It is none of your businesses. I lashed out, hurriedly picked my bag and rushed out of the cafeteria, ignoring their looks of surprises at my overreaction. Getting into my car, I dropped my bag on the other seat while I rested my head against the steering for a while, with my eyes closed. Colorful spots flashed in front of my eyes. It felt like my whole body had been beaten and every movement caused some muscle or bone to ache. Regardless, I needed to get out of here. I turned on the ignition key. Maybe Henry was right, I wasn't ready to come to work. By the time I got home, it was already some minutes past 7 p.m., the traffic was always crazy on Fridays. Having stepped out of the car, I pulled off my shoes and held them in my hand. I could see Henry's car beside mine, in the garage. He got home sooner today. I wondered why, because it was a Friday night and normally he would be at the club with Moses and the rest of their crew. I inserted my key into the keyhole and turned it, pulling the door open. It was a little dark and soft music seemed to be playing from somewhere in the house. There was power, so why were all the lights turned off? I asked myself. I walked to the switch. Babe. Henry's voice came astoundingly, almost giving me a heart attack. I turned around and saw him behind me. Do not turn on the light, he said softly. Henry. What the hell is happening? You are scaring me, I whispered, and he chuckled, kissing me on the lips. Come with me. I have a surprise. He ordered, taking my bag from me while holding me by the waist. It was a romantic dinner with the candles and all. That was why he put off the lights. It was fried rice and chicken with my favorite red wine. Did you cook this? I teased, and he gave me the look which always made me laugh. I wish, he replied. So how was work? I shook my head. I don't want to talk about it. Are they still asking you stuffs? I nodded. You can quit and we can start a supermarket for you, he said, lifting my hand to his lips. Thank you, darling, I replied with a smile. I want to do anything that would make you happy. Henry had been so supportive ever since that terrible incident of 3 months ago. He was doing everything to make me forget it. He was trying so hard. Had taken me for checkups at all the best hospitals in town, and thankfully, I was okay. Then he had hired a cleaner and a maid so I wouldn't have to stress myself. He also got me a therapist. Now, he planned a romantic dinner, just as he had done several times since we got back to Lagos. Just that, I knew he was doing all these out of sheer pity for me. Assuming that hadn't happened, would he do all these for me too? I sometimes wondered. It was some minutes past 10 p.m. I was busy reading the book Moving On with Life, which the therapist has given me. My back was turned towards Henry, who was busy fast asleep, or so I thought until I felt his hand caressing me. I flinched at first, because it was so sudden, but then I relaxed. It was just a normal caress, no big deal. I read on. He moved closer, pressing his body fully against me. Then he raised his head and placed it on my cheeks, breathing hot air into my ears. Henry, honey, stop that. Go back to bed, I said sternly. I tried to be calm at first, but then he brought his hand into my nightgown, reaching for my thighs, but I immediately yanked his hand off. He sighed in frustration. Babe, please. He pleaded. You know I can't do this, Henry. Why do you keep stressing us? I was beginning to get angry. It has been 3 months. I have done everything needful. When am I ever going to have sex with my wife? This is not fair. He shouted. I am human, I have urges. Would you prefer me going to the street? I am human too, and I am still healing. I snapped back at him. Now we were both sitting down, arms akimbo, and backs against the wall. This is not fair, Tola. What else do you want me to do for you? He asked softly. I want you to understand what happened to me destroyed me, Henry. I don't want to have sex, okay? Not yet. Until when, I planned a romantic dinner, fixed you for a therapist, I am changing your work for you. What else do I do? Are those not enough for you? What happened to me, Henry, wasn't a matter of the Tommy, you got me your own therapist and not the one I wanted. She keeps telling you to woo me and buy me beautiful things, but that is not what I want. So what do you want? I want to talk about it. I shouted. If we do not talk about it, there is no way we are moving past it. He calmed down. You want to talk about it? He asked, a little surprised. Yes, I replied. Okay, I am listening, he replied, squeezing and rubbing my hand. I sighed and shut my eyes as the memories came back to me, and the unsettling feeling began to well inside me again, so I held my Tommy. I am listening, babe. I opened my eyes and was looking at him. All the sincerity and love that I knew was all there, so I tell him that I thought that I heard that. I sighed. This would ruin us, and I didn't want that. Maybe I should just let it be like he had said. Henry, I'm sorry, let's just sleep please. I am sorry. He smiled and caressed my cheek before kissing me on the lips. It's okay, darling. Just know that I am here for you. I woke up late as I often did on every Saturday morning. Checking beside me, I realized he had woken up sooner. I stood up and having folded my blanket, I put it beside the pillow and left the room. I could hear noises and laughter coming from the living room. You are not serious. You think I am like you, have you forgotten what name they gave you then? Those guys were assholes. It was Felix, Henry's friend, he had come very early this morning. I walked in on them. They were both holding a cup of tea each while there was a third in the tray on the table. You see, you have disturbed my wife's sleep, Henry accused Felix, who was smiling at me as my husband extended his arm towards me, pulling me closer. Good morning, darling, he said, handing me a cup of hot tea as I sat down beside him before he kissed me on the lips. Morning, beauty. Sorry, we woke you up with our incessant noise, Felix apologized, giving me one of his dashing smiles which I knew so well. He was in a pink shirt, black jean and a pair of black trainers, his sunglasses were hooked in his hair. I used to love him in a pink shirt, he is fair, I used to tell him that pink color makes him look more hot, especially with his pink lips. You think I'm not used to that after all these years I have known you too? I replied, trying to ignore the effect his smile was having on me. They both chuckled. Felix maintained his eye contact at me, but I looked away. So what are we discussing this morning? I asked, placing a hand on my husband's shoulder. Nothing special, love, he came across an old picture during NYSC, so we were just discussing old days. Henry said. Days of harvesting, Felix put in, laughing so hard. What do you mean by days of harvesting? I asked, picking the picture on the table. There were a group of students in their school uniform while Henry sat in the middle beside a girl carrying a cake. Oh, someone was celebrating her birthday? I asked. Yeah. That is Tori, the brightest student in my class, Henry replied. Wow. It's good seeing your NYSC pictures. I replied. Thanks for bringing this, Felix. You know, I never saw any of his service pictures. Really? Felix asked. You didn't. I started, but Henry interrupted. Sure. You remember, I was robbed of one of my bags in the train that brought me back to Lagos. Oh, that, sure, Felix replied uncomfortably. So this was your brightest student in the class, you must really be proud of her, I said to Henry. Yeah, Henry said. No. Tori wasn't your brightest student, Henry. Have you forgotten your baby Benita? That girl loved you so much. Her whole family worshipped you. You know the period you were doing home lesson for her, and the principal thought something was going on between you two, and almost reported you to the inspector? Felix asked, excited. I shivered at the name. Why did it sound so familiar? Excuse me, please. I need to pick something in the room. I watched as Henry stood up abruptly and began to climb up the stairs that led to our bedroom. Then I faced Felix, but he was already pulling me closer to him. Stop it, Felix, are you high? I snapped at him quietly, pulling my arm from his grip. Oh my God. You still smell so amazing when you just wake up, he said, sniffing at my hair and holding me closely and forcefully by the waist. You need to stop this nonsense this minute, I ordered, beating his arm and looking hesitantly towards the staircase. You know I love it when you hit my arm playfully. I groaned, and using all my willpower, I pulled away from him, maintaining a considerable distance. We were looking at each other. He looked as handsome as the devil, giving me that low sexy look while biting his lower lip. You should have been mine, you know that, he growled. Well, you are too late, I replied before changing the subject. What did you call the girl's name again? Which girl? He asked, and I pointed at the picture. Benita. I think she died or so. She's not in the picture. I don't really understand what happened with her, he replied nonchalantly. The name rang a bell. Where have I heard it before? Honey, I'm hungry. Can you please fix us something to eat? Henry's voice snapped me out of my thoughts. He came into view as he climbed down the stairs. Sure, baby, I replied and stood up, ignoring Felix as completely as I could before heading towards the kitchen. My head ached terribly. It was someone was hitting my head against an armored tank. My heart was beating rapidly, and my arm hurt. My vision was blurry, but I could sense that I was still bound. I could hear Henry's occasional whimper and one of the men, talking to him, pointing a gun at him. I turned my head slowly. It was like watching a movie in a slow motion and zooming in and out. I could see the movement of the man's lips as they came together slowly, and then parted a little before opening even wider as if he was saying, Benita. She's awake. The other man shouted, and the first man left Henry and was now walking towards me. His face wasn't so clear, part of the effect of the drug I was given. I felt him entered me in one full thrust, and the agony and pain I felt that day started building up in me, shattering me inside out and jerking me back to consciousness. I was covered in sweat and I could hear my heart still beating so loudly. I felt a touch beside me and I screamed, yanking the hand off before I realized it was my husband who quickly put on the light. Baby, it's me, he said before pulling me into his arms, comforting me. I rested against his chest as I tried to calm down. You are okay, love. You are okay. He was patting me on the back as I relaxed more. Do you want to talk about it? He asked. I thought for a while. Talk about the name he had mentioned with Felix earlier today, magically showing up in my dream. No, I replied, pulling the blanket over me. Should we go to the therapist today? I nodded. Yes, please. I was sitting down beside Henry in front of Kate, my therapist. She was sitting down all dressed in red suit, her large glasses pressed on her tiny nose, while she scribbled something down in the note on her lap. So, how are we doing today? Kate asked. Fine, I replied, absent-mindedly. Do you think we are making progress at all? She asked again, directly at Henry, who nodded. So are you saying that your wife is improving sexually and emotionally? Henry hesitated for a while, but later nodded. You don't need to lie, Henry, we both know I'm not. I blurted. I believe she still needs more time. Henry explained, holding my hand. I do not think I do, Henry. I think I am not making progress at all, I said sharply. I had no idea why I was feeling so irritated when he was being nothing but nice. Please let us all calm down, Kate said calmly. I am sensing some tension here and I need to know what is going on. What is going on here is that my wife will not accept that she needs more time. Henry replied, gently. But I do not. I shouted, now facing him. I do not understand what is going on, Henry. Maybe I need time, maybe I do not. I don't know. I still don't know why you refused to report the incidents to the police, since all these days. But honey, I thought it's for your own good. You agreed to this. Henry sighed and buried his face in his hands. Well, Mr. and Mrs. James, may I know what is actually going on? Because I do not understand this sudden outburst from the two of you. We were both quiet. I realized I was acting as a result of my own doubts or suspicion, and he was acting out of his own fear. Maybe I should just apologize, or better still, remain quiet. My wife had a nightmare last night. She refused to share it, and I respect her choice. I am not going to force her into anything she doesn't want to do. I just want her to know whatever she is going through, I am here for her. I looked at Henry. He was being sincere, but that was just not enough for me. I needed so much more, yet I was so afraid I might end up being an ingrate and then ruin our marriage. I didn't want that. Madam, is there anything that is making you afraid? Kate asked. I sighed. Maybe. Like what? I don't know. I replied. The two exchanged glances, and Henry held my other hand to his lips. Love, you need time to heal. I will buy you anything you want, take you out of the country if you want, just tell me what you need me to do. Who is Benita? I finally asked, looking into his eyes. I could have sworn that he flinched, but he maintained his position, or maybe it was my thought. Who is Benita? He asked again, and I nodded. I don't know what you are talking about. He replied. That day I was bound, I heard the guy mention a name. Now, I heard same name yesterday. Who is she? The two exchanged glances again. You were drugged that day, you remember? You cannot trust whatever you think you may have heard or seen. I thought for a while, maybe he was right, maybe this was a mistake. God, I was losing my mind. But I started, but stopped. Okay, I am sorry. I think I need to go lie down. I replied. We later left the therapist that day, and after Henry left for work, I sent a message to Felix. He must definitely have something to tell me.